The morning light in Willow Bend, a sleepy little town tucked between Ohio's green hills, arrived like a hymn, soft, golden, and too gentle for what the day would bring. The 4th of July was always the biggest day of the summer. Streets were blocked off, church bells rang at dawn, and the smell of barbecued ribs floated through the air long before the parade began. Along Maple Avenue, the sidewalks were lined with folding chairs and picnic blankets. Grandparents wore sun hats, toddlers clutched cotton candy bigger than their faces, and every porch had its flag waving proudly in the breeze. Fire trucks were polished until they gleamed. The high school band tuned their brass instruments in the parking lot behind the diner, and shop owners stood at their doors handing out free lemonade. Inside her mother's kitchen, Lila Carter stood in front of the mirror, tacked to the pantry door. Her cheer uniform, a navy skirt and a white top embroidered with WBHS eagles, fit tighter this year. Her hair, long and chestnut brown, was tied into a perfect ribboned ponytail. Her mother, Diane, hovered behind her, smoothing the pleats of the skirt as if the world would notice a single wrinkle. "You look perfect, sweetheart," Diane said, smiling faintly. Lila forced a nod. "Thanks, Mom." But behind her reflection she could see the empty chair at the kitchen table, the chair her father always sat in for breakfast. It hadn't been touched since last night. The night before she had heard everything, the shouting, the crash of a plate, her mother's trembling voice, her father's final words before the door slammed, "You want to play perfect? Fine, keep pretending," and then the sound of his truck fading into the distance. Now the town's loudspeaker crackled to life outside. "Willow Bend High cheer team, you're up next. Get ready, girls." Her mother kissed her cheek. "Remember to smile." Lila managed another nod and ran out the front door, into the blaze of summer sunlight that made everything seem normal again. The float waited by the corner of Main Street. It was decked out in red and blue streamers, silver tinsel fluttering along the edges. "Freedom and Spirit" was painted across the side in bold white letters. Her teammates, 5 other girls with bright lipstick and nervous laughter, were already waving to the crowd. Lila, finally. "Harp up," said Amber, the captain, brushing glitter on her own cheeks. "We're the stars this year." Lila climbed onto the float. Music blared from the nearby marching band, the first notes of Stars and Stripes Forever. The float began to move slowly, wheels creaking as it turned onto the parade route. The crowd erupted in cheers. "Go, Eagles!" "Hey, that's my granddaughter." "Smile, girls." Lila waved, every muscle in her face stretched into a perfect camera-ready grin. The air shimmered with heat and her throat felt dry. She saw Mr. Jenkins, their old math teacher, clapping proudly. She waved harder. She saw her best friend Katie's family waving from their porch. She smiled wider, but behind the noise a deeper silence hummed inside her. She could almost hear her parents' voices again, echoing over the crowd, the argument replaying in her mind like an endless loop. "You always care more about appearances than your own family, and you, Mark, care about nothing at all." Her hand faltered for half a second, but the float kept rolling. She turned toward the crowd again, fixing the smile that was starting to tremble. "Hey, you okay?" Amber whispered beside her. "Yeah," Lila said quickly. "Just the sun. It's hot." The camera flashes went off from all directions. One photographer from the local newspaper stood right near the corner, his lens trained on her. Lila's smile widened again instinctively. Her cheeks ached from holding it too long. Then a sudden gust of wind caught the flag behind her, and she reached up to steady it. In that small moment, just a flicker, she brushed her wrist across her cheek, wiping away the tear that had been burning her eye since the float started moving. No one saw. The cheerleaders around her kept laughing, shouting chants, waving their shiny pom-poms to the rhythm of the band. From the sidewalk, her mother watched with arms crossed, smiling the same polished smile she wore at church and PTA meetings. To anyone else, they looked like a perfect family, a proud mother and her radiant daughter representing their town. The crowd clapped as the float turned down Main Street, banners fluttering behind them. Firecrackers burst in the distance, kids screamed in delight, and the mayor waved from the grandstand. Somewhere behind the crowd, an empty truck sat by the side of the road, its engine cold, its owner nowhere to be found. Hours later, when the local paper would print the photo of Lila waving from the float, the caption would read, "Willow Bend's own, the spirit of independence." The whole town would see her smile and say how happy she looked, but before that photo was taken, she had already cried herself silent. Her world, like the red, white and blue glitter on that float, was already starting to come apart. That evening, after the fireworks faded and the smell of gunpowder drifted away with the smoke, Willow Bend returned to its quiet rhythm, the kind that made people think nothing bad could ever happen here. The small-town peace was deceptive, like the hush after a storm that hadn't yet finished. Lila sat by her bedroom window, the parade ribbon still tied around her wrist, the glitter from her uniform now faint and dull. From across the yard came the distant sound of frogs by the creek and the low hum of a passing car on County Road 6. The photo from that morning, her on the float, smiling like joy itself, was already everywhere. The local news station had posted it on Facebook. Willow Bend High's cheer captain lights up the 4th. Her mother had shared it, of course. "So proud of my girl," Diane wrote with 3 heart emojis. Dozens of comments followed. Neighbors, teachers, even old family friends. "She's grown up so beautiful. What a lovely smile. You two must be so proud." Lila scrolled through them all, her thumb hovering over the heart icons. Then she locked her phone and tossed it onto the bed. She couldn't stand it anymore. The parade of digital happiness that didn't match what was real. Downstairs, she could hear the faint clink of a glass and the low hum of the TV. Her mother always left the TV on at night lately, just for the noise. The house felt emptier since her dad left 3 nights ago. He hadn't called. Not once. Lila looked at the empty driveway, at the dark patch of gravel where his truck used to sit. It still smelled faintly of motor oil when the wind shifted. She pressed her forehead against the cool window pane, trying to swallow the lump in her throat. Her younger brother Evan, only 12, knocked softly at her door. "Lila." "Yeah?" she said, wiping her eyes quickly. "Mom says come down, dinner." "I'm not hungry." "She made mac and cheese." "I said I'm not hungry, Evan," she snapped, louder than she meant. He lingered a second, then his small voice said, "Okay," before the sound of his footsteps retreated down the hall. Lila buried her face in her pillow. Guilt spread through her chest like fire. Evan didn't deserve that. He still didn't understand what was happening. He thought Dad would be home any minute. Her phone buzzed again. A text from her best friend, Katie Reynolds. "You were amazing today. I'm obsessed with that pic they posted, OMG. Another text followed a moment later. "Also, are you okay?" Joe seemed quiet at the after-party. Lila stared at the screen for a while, typing and deleting replies. Finally, she sent back, "Yeah, just tired." "Long day." Then she added a heart emoji, because that's what people expected when you were the smiling girl from the float. Downstairs, Diane sat at the dining table with her laptop open. Bills, half-folded letters and an untouched plate of food surrounded her. She looked up as Lila came down the stairs. Finally. "Eat something, sweetheart." Lila sat down silently. The TV in the living room flickered with a rerun of Wheel of Fortune, the volume low. Her mother's eyes were red-rimmed. She'd been crying but trying to look composed. "Your father called," she said suddenly, her voice tight. Lila's fork froze halfway to her mouth. "When?" "About an hour ago. What did he say?" "That he's staying with your Aunt Marjorie for a while." Lila swallowed hard. "So that's it." "Don't start, Lila." "Start what?" "I'm just asking what's happening. You two think I don't notice?" Her mother sighed, pushing her plate away. "It's not that simple." "Yeah, it never is," Lila muttered. They ate in silence after that, 2 people at the same table, both pretending to be full. Later that night, when everyone had gone to bed, Lila wandered into the living room. The house was dark except for the blue glow from the muted TV. She picked up a framed photo from the mantel, a family picture taken last Christmas. Her father, Mark Carter, had one arm around her, the other around Evan. Her mother stood beside them holding a mug of cocoa, her smile bright but distant. Lila ran her thumb over her father's face. She remembered how he'd built her first bike, how he used to cheer for her at every football game, how he'd promised to teach her to drive this summer. Now, she didn't even know where he was. On the TV, a fireworks replay flashed across the screen, explosions of red and blue lighting up a distant city. She sank onto the couch and whispered, "Why did you have to go?" Outside, rain began to fall, soft at first, then steady, tapping against the window panes. The sound was oddly comforting. She closed her eyes and let it wash over her. In her half-sleep, she thought she heard something. Her father's truck in the driveway, maybe, or footsteps on the porch. She sat up suddenly, heart pounding. But when she looked outside, there was nothing. Only the dark outline of the empty street, the flag in their front yard soaked and drooping under the rain. She let the curtain fall back and went upstairs again, her heart heavy. In her room, her phone screen glowed with a notification, a new message from her father. "Hey, kiddo. I'm sorry about everything. I'll come by this weekend. We need to talk." Her breath caught in her throat. For the first time in days, she smiled faintly. Maybe things weren't completely broken. Maybe the photo everyone saw wasn't a lie after all. Maybe there was still a chance for another one where they were all together again. She didn't know then that this message would be the last she'd ever get from him, because before the weekend came, something would happen that no one in Willow Bend could ever forget. The next morning, Willow Bend woke to the sound of summer cicadas and the distant hum of lawnmowers. The rain from the night before had washed the air clean, and sunlight spilled through the Carter family's front windows, glinting on the picture frames that still held fragments of a happier time. Lila woke late, her phone still in her hand from the night before. The message from her father blinked on the screen. "Hey, kiddo. I'm sorry about everything. I'll come by this weekend. We need to talk." She read it again and again, as if memorizing each letter could hold him closer. For the first time in weeks, she felt a flicker of something that almost resembled hope. She dressed quickly, pulling on jeans and a faded hoodie, then rushed downstairs. Her mother was already in the kitchen, still in her robe, staring blankly at her coffee mug as the local morning news played on the small TV above the counter. The smell of burnt toast hung in the air. "Morning," Lila said softly. Diane looked up, her eyes swollen from another sleepless night. "Morning, sweetheart. Did you sleep okay?" Lila hesitated. "Sort of." She poured a bowl of cereal and sat across from her mother. "Did Dad call again?" "No," Diane said, glancing at the phone on the counter. "But he sent me a message late last night. Said he'd stop by this weekend." Lila tried to hide the small smile forming on her lips. "He texted me too." Her mother's eyes flickered briefly, a mixture of surprise and something close to hurt. "Oh, he said he wanted to talk," Lila continued. "That has to be good, right? Maybe he's finally ready to fix things." Diane's fingers tightened around her coffee cup. "Maybe," she said carefully. "Or maybe he just wants to talk about logistics. He's been talking to a lawyer, Lila. This isn't simple." The word lawyer hung in the air like smoke. Lila's appetite vanished. That afternoon she decided to walk into town. The streets were quieter now that the parade was over. Banners still fluttered from the lampposts. Faded confetti littered the curbs, and shopkeepers were sweeping remnants of red, white, and blue streamers from their doorways. The same photo of her, the parade smile, was now printed in the front window of the Willow Gazette. She stopped to look at it. Her smile gleamed under the glass, so bright, so perfect. To the rest of the world, it looked like the face of a girl who had everything together. "Hey there, Miss Firecracker," called a voice from behind. It was Mr. Fields, the elderly postmaster, leaning on his cane. "Saw you on that float, young lady. You made the whole town proud." Lila smiled politely. "Thanks, Mr. Fields," he chuckled. "You keep that smile up and you'll go places. Don't let the world knock it out of you." She nodded, though her throat felt tight. After a moment, she continued down Main Street, past the bakery, the library, and the hardware store her father used to take her to when she was little. Every corner held a memory. When she passed the car repair shop, she froze. Her father's blue pickup truck, dented on the left fender, the one he always promised to fix, sat parked outside. Her pulse spiked. She looked through the glass door and saw him inside, leaning over the counter, talking to the mechanic. For a moment, she couldn't move. She wanted to rush in, hug him, tell him she missed him, but she didn't. She just watched. He looked tired, older somehow. His hair uncombed, shirt wrinkled, but when he laughed at something the mechanic said, she caught a glimpse of the man she knew. The man who once danced with her in the kitchen while pancakes burned on the stove. Then his phone rang. He pulled it out, looked at the screen, and frowned. He stepped outside, pacing. Lila ducked behind a parked car. "Yeah, Diane," he said, his voice carrying across the street. "I told you I'll come by Saturday. Don't start this now." "No, I'm not avoiding it. I just need some space. He rubbed his temple, exhaling sharply. For God's sake, can't we keep it civil? For the kids, at least? The call ended. He stood there for a moment, staring down the street, toward her, though he couldn't see her hidden in the sunlight glare. She thought of calling his name, but something stopped her. She didn't want him to see her cry again. When he finally drove away, she stood there long after the truck had disappeared, the sound of the engine fading into the distance like a promise half kept. That evening the house felt quieter than ever. Diane sat in the living room sorting through old photo albums, some of them yellowed with age. She paused at one picture, a much younger Mark holding baby Lila in the hospital, both of them wrapped in soft white blankets. She traced the photo with her fingertip, whispering, "What happened to us?" Lila peeked in from the hallway. Her mother quickly shut the album. "Could you take the trash out, honey?" she asked, her tone brisk. "Sure." Outside, the sun dipped low, painting the neighborhood in shades of orange and rose. Fireflies blinked over the lawn. Lila carried the trash to the curb and leaned against the mailbox for a moment, looking up at the slowly darkening sky. Across the street, the Reynolds porch light flickered on. Katie was there waving. "Hey, come over." Lila crossed the road. Inside, the Reynolds house was warm, noisy, alive. Her friends' little brothers chasing each other through the hall, her mom singing softly in the kitchen. It felt like what her own house used to be. Katie grabbed 2 sodas from the fridge and handed her one. "So, your mom and dad, are they talking again?" Lila hesitated. "He texted me. Said he's coming by this weekend." Katie's face brightened. "See, that's good news." "I guess." They went up to Katie's room, posters of pop bands covering the walls, fairy lights twinkling around the window. Lila sat cross-legged on the floor, sipping her soda. Katie looked at her carefully. "You know you don't have to act like everything's fine all the time." Lila frowned. "What do you mean?" "You're always smiling, even when you're breaking apart." "I saw you on the float, Lila. Everyone saw the smile, but your eyes looked different." Lila looked away, her throat tight. "I just don't want people to think my family's falling apart." Katie nodded gently. "You don't have to carry that alone." That night, back home, Lila lay awake staring at the ceiling fan spinning slow circles above her. The house was silent again, except for the ticking of the hallway clock and the occasional croak of frogs outside. Her phone buzzed once, a notification from a weather app. Severe storm warning for northern Ohio counties. She ignored it, closing her eyes. Tomorrow was Friday. Just one more day until her father came back. Just one more day until things started to heal. But in another part of town at that exact hour, Mark Carter was standing outside a roadside bar, talking to a man he shouldn't have trusted. Rain began to fall again and the storm rolled closer. By morning, Willow Bend would wake to another headline, one that would change everything. The photo of the smiling girl from the parade would still hang in the window of the Willow Gazette. But by then, no one would look at it the same way ever again. Saturday morning came with heavy grey clouds pressing low over Willow Bend, turning the town's bright lawns and white fences into something muted, almost unreal. The radio warned of a coming storm, thunder moving in from the west, maybe flash floods by nightfall, but Lila barely heard it. All she could think about was her father. He was supposed to come today. She'd been awake since dawn, cleaning her room like a soldier waiting for inspection, making her bed twice, lining her trophies on the shelf, opening the curtains wide. She wanted everything perfect, like the family they used to be. Downstairs, Diane was pretending to read the newspaper, her eyes drifting every few lines toward the clock. She wore her nicest blouse, her wedding ring still on, though she'd taken it off every night that week. The coffee had gone cold hours ago. "Do you think he'll be here before lunch?" Lila asked, standing in the doorway. Diane folded the paper. He said, morning. "So yes, I hope so." They both smiled, but their eyes didn't. At 10:17 a.m., a sound came. Not a knock, not an engine, but the sharp buzz of a phone vibrating on the kitchen counter. Diane lunged for it, almost spilling her coffee. It was a text from Mark. "Running late. Need to stop by town first. See you soon," Diane exhaled. "He's coming," she said, her voice trembling with something halfway between relief and fear. Lila felt her heart lift. "See? I told you." She ran to her room to grab the drawing she'd made for him months ago, a charcoal sketch of the family from an old photograph, one of the few things she was proud of. She folded it carefully and tucked it into an envelope. Outside, thunder grumbled in the distance. The sky darkened. By noon, the storm had arrived. Rain slashed against the windows in sheets. The trees bent under the wind, and lightning flashed over the horizon. Still no truck. Lila sat on the couch staring at the driveway. Diane paced from window to window, trying not to look worried but failing miserably. Maybe he pulled over because of the storm, Lila said softly. Maybe. Then the phone rang. Both of them jumped. Diane grabbed the receiver, her hand shaking slightly. Hello? It was Sheriff Tom Walker, an old family friend. His voice was quiet, hesitant. Diane, it's Tom. Are you home? Yes, of course. What is it? There was a long pause on the other end. I need you and Lila to stay put, okay? I'm on my way over. Why? What's wrong? Just stay home, Diane. I'll be there in 10 minutes. Her stomach dropped. Tom, you're scaring me. But the line had already gone dead. Lila looked up. Mom? Diane forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Nothing. Sheriff just needs to talk to us about something. Probably storm safety. But her hands were trembling too badly to hide it. The minutes crawled by. Rain hammered the roof like fists. The thunder grew closer, shaking the window panes. Then, through the grey blur outside, they saw the sheriff's cruiser pull into the driveway, red and blue lights spinning faintly in the rain. Lila ran to the door, but her mother's voice stopped her cold. Wait. Diane walked to the door slowly, opened it halfway. The sheriff stood there in his soaked uniform, hat pressed low, eyes shadowed with something that made Lila's heart freeze. Tom? Diane said. He swallowed. Can I come in? They sat in the living room. The only sound was the storm outside, the drip of rainwater from the sheriff's jacket onto the hardwood floor. Tom took off his hat, held it in his lap. There's been an accident. Lila felt her pulse roar in her ears. Her mother's face went pale. No, she whispered, before he even said the rest. Mark's truck was found off County Road 6 near the old quarry. Looks like he lost control in the rain. It rolled down the embankment. No. Diane's voice cracked, breaking into a sound no words could shape. He didn't make it, Diane. For a moment everything was silent. No thunder, no rain, no heartbeat. Then Lila's world shattered. She didn't hear her mother scream. Didn't feel Tom's hand on her shoulder. She just stood up and stumbled toward the door out into the storm. Lila! Her mother called, but she didn't stop. The rain hit her face like shards of glass. She ran barefoot down the street, the world spinning around her, sobs tearing from her chest. She didn't know where she was going, just away. Away from the truth that refused to fit inside her. She stopped only when she reached the corner of Main Street, the same place the parade float had turned just days ago. The same spot where she'd smiled for the camera, pretending everything was fine. Now the flags were gone. The confetti washed away by the rain. She fell to her knees on the wet pavement, clutching the envelope she still held, the drawing for her father. The ink ran, the faces blurred, and she realized she'd never get to give it to him. Hours later, the town knew. News spread faster than the rain. Mark Carter killed in highway accident. The same local newspaper that had printed Lila's smiling photo now ran another headline beside it. Community mourns beloved local mechanic. That night, the two photos hung side by side in the shop window. The man who was gone, and the daughter still waving, frozen in time before she knew it. Inside the Carter house, silence settled heavy as dust. Diane sat by the window, staring out into the storm's fading light. Lila sat on the floor beside her, the torn drawing in her lap. I didn't get to say goodbye, she whispered. Her mother didn't answer. She just reached over and pulled Lila into her arms. Outside, lightning flickered once more, illuminating the flag still hanging from the porch. It was soaked, drooping, barely moving, but it was still there, the same way they both were, while bent, battered but not yet broken. Before the photo was taken, no one saw the tear she wiped away. Now no one could look at that smile without remembering the storm that followed. The funeral came 3 days later. The skies over Willow Bend were mercilessly clear that morning, blue and brilliant, the kind of sky that should have belonged to weddings or picnics, not graves. The air smelled of cut grass and lilies, and the church bells rang too softly as though they, too, were afraid to disturb the quiet grief that hung over the town. Lila stood between her mother and her little brother, clutching the folded flag the sheriff had brought from the crash site. Her fingers trembled, but her face stayed still, carved into that same practiced smile she'd worn for the parade. Only now it was empty, a ghost of what it used to be. The church was full. People who hadn't spoken to the Carters in years came out in pressed shirts and dark ties, bearing casseroles, condolences, and the awkward kindness that fills the space when no words will do. The pastor spoke gently about community, about faith, about how God's plans often live beyond our understanding. Lila heard none of it. She just kept her eyes on the wooden casket at the front of the aisle, the one her father now lay in. A white carnation rested on top, already beginning to wilt. Her mind kept flashing back to that last message. "See you soon." 2 words that now hurt worse than any goodbye. After the burial, when most of the town had drifted away, Lila stayed behind. The cemetery was quiet except for the wind brushing through the maple trees. A single crow perched on a nearby headstone, cawing once before flying off. She knelt beside the fresh mound of earth, pressing her palm into the cool dirt. "Hey, Dad," she whispered. "You kept your word. You came home." Her voice cracked on the last word. The letter she'd written him, the drawing she'd tried to save from the rain, lay folded inside the casket, tucked there by her own hand. She had begged the funeral director to let her. He had looked at her for a long moment, then quietly nodded. Now she wished she'd written more. Behind her, footsteps crunched softly on the gravel. It was Katie holding 2 cups of coffee. She offered one wordlessly. Lila took it with shaking hands. "Thanks." They sat together on the grass for a long while. "I remember when your dad helped us fix the porch steps," Katie said. "He wouldn't even take money, just smiled and said, 'That's what neighbors are for.' My mom cried when she heard the news." Lila nodded slowly. "He was like that, always helping everyone. Never himself." Katie hesitated. "Your photo's still in the Gazette window. They didn't take it down." "I know. They probably mean it as something nice." Lila looked toward the horizon. "It just feels wrong now. Like she's still smiling for a world that doesn't exist anymore." Katie didn't answer. She just leaned her head against Lila's shoulder, and together they watched the shadows lengthen across the graves. That night, the house felt hollow. Diane sat at the dining table surrounded by stacks of paperwork, insurance forms, condolences, bills, each envelope a reminder of how final everything was. Her eyes were glazed, the way people look when grief becomes too heavy to carry in one piece. Evan sat on the couch, hugging his father's old jacket. He hadn't spoken much since the funeral. Every now and then, he would sniff the collar like it still carried his father's scent. Lila stood in the doorway watching them. The house used to sound alive. Her father's laughter from the garage, her mother's humming from the kitchen, Evan's video games echoing through the hallway. Now it sounded like a museum after hours, quiet, orderly, and full of things that no longer had a purpose. She went upstairs to her room and opened her window. The summer air drifted in, warm and sweet with honeysuckle. Somewhere down the road, someone was lighting sparklers again, left over from the 4th. The tiny flares lit the dark for a few seconds before burning out. She thought of the parade again. The noise, the cheers, the camera flash that had frozen her smile in time. She remembered the way her father always stood at the corner during parades, waving like a fool. This year he hadn't come. She told herself he was just busy. She realized now that she'd been smiling for him that whole time. The next morning, Diane found her sitting at the kitchen table, sketching. Sheets of paper were scattered everywhere. Faces, hands, half-finished drawings of her father leaning over an engine, of Evan's small smile, of her mother's tired eyes. "Couldn't sleep?" Diane asked softly. Lila shook her head. "I keep thinking. People remember him for how he died, but I want them to remember how he lived." Her mother leaned against the counter. "How he lived?" "Yeah," Lila said, her voice steadier than before. "The little things, like how he used to whistle while he fixed things. How he'd sneak cookies into my lunchbox. How he'd always say, 'Keep your chin up,' when I messed up a routine." Diane smiled faintly. "He'd like that. I'm going to draw it all. Every memory." Her mother reached across the table and took her hand. "Then I'll frame them. Everyone." Days turned into weeks. The storm that had drowned their world gave way to sunlight again. The grass over the grave began to grow green and soft. Lila returned to school in late August, still quiet, but something inside her had changed. She started volunteering at the local paper after class. When the editor, Mrs. Hargrove, asked why, she said, "I just want to learn how stories are told." The same Gazette office still displayed her parade photo in the window. One day she walked up to Mrs. Hargrove and said, "Could we take that one down?" The woman frowned gently. "That photo made a lot of people smile." Lila nodded. "I know, but that's not who I am anymore." Mrs. Hargrove studied her for a moment, then smiled sadly. "All right, sweetheart." A week later, the photo was gone. In its place hung a new one, taken by Lila herself. It showed the town park at sunset, golden light spilling through the trees, a small bench beneath the willow where her father used to sit with her as a child. The caption read, "Before the photo was taken, by Lila Carter." That evening, Diane and Evan joined her at the park. The sky turned pink, cicadas hummed, and the sound of children's laughter carried from the swings. For the first time in months, the air didn't feel heavy. Evan tugged her sleeve. "Can we get ice cream after this?" Lila smiled down at him. "Yeah, we can do that." Her mother reached over and brushed a strand of hair from Lila's face. "Your father would be proud of you, you know." "I hope so," she whispered. The sun dipped below the trees, casting long shadows over the water. For a brief fleeting moment, she imagined her father sitting there on that bench again, smiling. Not the broken kind of smile from the end, but the easy one that said everything will be okay. The wind rustled through the leaves, as if answering her thoughts. And for the first time since the parade, since that photograph, since the tear she'd tried to hide, Lila truly smiled. It wasn't the kind meant for cameras or crowds. It was small, quiet, and real, because now she understood. Sometimes the moments before the photo, the pain, the silence, the heartbreak, are what make the smiles that follow mean something at all. Autumn came slowly to Willow Bend, wrapping the small town in amber light and the smell of fallen leaves. By October, the flags from the summer parade were gone. The hardware store replaced its window display with pumpkins, and the air turned sharp enough to make breath visible in the mornings. Life had begun to move again, quietly, carefully, like a wound beginning to knit beneath a scar. But for the Carters, every step forward carried the weight of remembering. Lila started her senior year with a strange mixture of grief and determination. Her classmates didn't know how to treat her. Some offered awkward smiles in the hallways. Others looked away entirely, afraid of saying the wrong thing. She didn't blame them. The first time she walked back into the gym for cheer practice, the echo of her own sneakers on the polished floor made her chest tighten. The blue and white banners still hung from the rafters, shouting words like spirit, pride, victory. Words that used to mean something simpler. Amber, the captain, spotted her and hesitated. "Lila, hey, you sure you want to do this?" Lila nodded. "I need to." The first few minutes were agony. Every shout of "Go Eagles" felt like a ghost of who she'd been. But as the music began and her muscles remembered the rhythm, something unexpected happened. Her body moved with memory, and the ache that had lived inside her for months shifted. Just a little. For the first time since the funeral, she laughed. Not loudly, not for show, but enough for the other girls to glance at her and smile back. After practice, she walked home beneath a sky painted in streaks of orange and violet. The sidewalks were scattered with leaves, the air cool and clean. Passing the Willow Gazette, she stopped again by the window. Her new photograph still hung there, the park bench beneath the willow tree, her father's favorite spot. Beneath the photo, Mrs. Hargrove had added a short caption in black type. "A moment of stillness, proof that even after storms, light returns." Lila stared at it for a long time. People passing on the sidewalk might have thought she was simply admiring her work, but she was remembering the voice that used to tell her, "Find the light, kiddo, no matter how small it seems." She turned away with a soft exhale, whispering, "I found it, Dad. At home." Her mother was reorganizing the garage. The scent of dust and motor oil filled the air. Mark Carter's tools still hung neatly on the wall, outlines drawn behind them in fading marker, each wrench and screwdriver waiting in its perfect place. "I thought maybe we could sell some of this stuff," Diane said quietly. "But then I couldn't. Not yet." Lila picked up her father's work gloves. The leather was cracked and stiff, stained with years of grease. "Maybe we don't have to sell them," she said. "Maybe we can finish what he started." Her mother looked at her. "What do you mean?" He always talked about fixing that old motorcycle in the shed. Said he wanted to ride it with you to Lake Erie someday. A soft, sad smile crossed Diane's face. I remember. Lila set the gloves down. Then let's do it. You, me, and Evan. We'll finish it for him. For the first time in months, her mother didn't cry. She just nodded. They spent weeks working on it, every weekend, every spare hour after dinner. The motorcycle was a rusted mess at first, a forgotten relic buried beneath years of dust and tools. But slowly, piece by piece, they brought it back to life. Evan held the flashlight while Lila tightened bolts. Diane painted the tank the same blue as Mark's old truck. When the engine finally coughed, sputtered, and roared to life one chilly November afternoon, all three of them stood there in silence, tears glistening in their eyes. He'd be swearing with joy right now, Diane said. Laughing through her tears, Lila grinned. Yeah, and telling us we did it wrong. They laughed until they couldn't breathe, the sound echoing through the open garage like sunlight, finding its way into an old house. That night, they took the bike up to the hill overlooking Willow Bend. The wind was cold, carrying the smell of rain and wood smoke. Below them, the town lights glimmered, tiny constellations scattered across the earth. Diane straddled the bike, revved it once, and smiled toward the dark horizon. For you, Mark, she whispered. Then she let Lila take a short ride down the slope, the motor humming beneath her, her hair whipping behind her like a flag. For those few seconds, she felt something she hadn't felt in so long: freedom, weightlessness, peace. At the bottom of the hill, she stopped, turned off the engine, and looked up at the sky. The stars above Willow Bend were sharper than she'd ever seen. She thought of that parade photo again, the one frozen smile that everyone else had mistaken for happiness. Now she knew that the truth behind every smile wasn't about pretending everything was perfect. It was about choosing to keep standing even when it wasn't. Winter arrived. Snow covered the rooftops, and Christmas lights blinked along Main Street. The Carter house began to fill with warmth again, soft laughter, the smell of hot chocolate, the glow of a fire. On Christmas Eve, Diane pulled an envelope from under the tree. This came in the mail yesterday, she said. Lila opened it carefully. Inside was a small brown package with no return address, just her father's handwriting, slanted, rough, unmistakable. Her breath caught. Inside the package was a keychain, a tiny silver wrench, and a folded note. Found this in the glove box before the accident. You always wanted something of mine, so here it is. You're stronger than you think, kiddo. Don't let life make you forget that. Love you always. Dad. Lila's tears fell silently onto the paper. She pressed the keychain to her chest. For a long time no one spoke. The fire crackled softly, painting their faces gold. Finally, Diane whispered, "Merry Christmas, Mark," and somehow, Lila felt like he heard it. Years later, people would still remember that photograph from the parade, the smiling girl on the float, waving in the sunlight. It would hang in the town museum eventually, next to a small plaque telling her story. Lila Carter, artist, journalist, and community advocate. Her work reminded Willow Bend that every smile carries a story worth listening to. Visitors would pause, looking at the image, the sunlight, the glitter, the young girl frozen in her moment of innocence, and they would never guess what she was hiding behind that smile. But those who had lived through it, the neighbors, the friends, the people who had seen her grow knew. They knew that the strength in her smile wasn't born from perfection, but from surviving what came after. One summer evening many years later, hair-grown Lila stood again at the edge of Main Street as the town's 4th of July parade rolled through. Children waved flags, the band played, and laughter filled the air. A teenage girl on a float turned and waved at her, smiling wide, the same way she once had. Lila smiled back, a real gentle smile, then lifted her camera and took a single photograph. Click. The frame captured sunlight, joy and motion, the precise second before the girl's hand fell. Before her laughter faded into the noise of the crowd, Lila lowered her camera and whispered the words that had become her quiet mantra, the one her father had unknowingly given her. Before the photo was taken, there's always a story. Then she looked up at the parade, at the flags and the faces, at the town that had broken her and built her again. And for the first time, she didn't feel like a picture trapped in the past. She felt alive, free and full of light, and this time when she smiled, it wasn't to hide the pain. It was to honor the love that had survived it.